Now, there's still no word on a cure for the virus.
Report suspicious activity in the call 911.
Welcome back to your favorite podcast, That Would Be Rad, the podcast that majors in 80s and 90s nostalgia, comic culture, all things paranormal, and minors in retro video games, tabletop RPGs, pre-internet mysteries, and raising our kids to be half as cool as we were back in the 80s. I'm your host, Tyler Bentz, and this is your other host,
Woody Brown.
Hey, pal.
Hey, man. How you doing?
I'm pretty good, man.
You sound a lot better. I will say I'm not sick. But, you know, a consequence of the weather changing is sometimes my voice gets a little bit on the scratchy side.
Cool story, Granddad.
Yeah.
Anyway, my daughter, speaking of sick, we've been fine. My daughter and I, Elliot, decided to have a little secret daddy-daughter date while my wife and other daughter, Amelia, were at soccer practice. So we had McDonald's, as you do. We both got the same thing. Chicken nugget meal, everything. Within about 2 hours, she comes into our room and she's like, I flew up.
Yeah.
I'm not
exactly.
kidding.
Why would you get chicken nuggets from McDonald's? Disgusting.
Oh, I love
Keep
the
going.
chicken nuggets. Oh, they're awesome.
Disgusting.
The reason I bring this up is that I've never witnessed the volume.
Oh, God. Come on. Dude, people are listening to this on their way to work.
It was so bad.
Beautiful Monday morning. And the first thing they're thinking about is the spongy substance that McDonald's calls chicken. Okay, look,
dude,
we're not gonna get into that. That's disgusting, and I feel bad for her. I hope she's doing better.
Yeah, she's
but
good.
Also, hopefully, there's a lesson there, and that is, don't get the chicken nuggets.
Oh, they're great. Get the chicken nuggets.
We're not sponsored by them. Okay, and then when
brought to you by McDonald's.
Yeah. When they do decide to, send us some cash, you're going to say, hey, look, chicken nuggets. Okay,
We love them.
Here recently, man, I feel like there have just been so many back-to-back synchronistic moments. And maybe I'm just noticing it more now. I don't know. Maybe it's that everything's connected. Maybe we're all connected. But speaking of synchronicity, dude, I'm so pumped up about today's show because this is something that occurred in September, almost to the day 60 years ago.
That's right.
It all kicks off in September of 1964 when a 26-year-old guy named Donald Shrum, I just want to make sure I enunciated that correctly, just in case you're thinking I was talking about a presidential candidate. This person, Donald Shrum, went out hunting with a couple of his buddies in Cisco Grove, California. They're out there looking for game when Don ends up getting separated from his friends. He's out in the middle of nowhere, the sun's going down, and he realizes he's not going to be able to find his way back to camp anytime soon. Now, he's no rookie here. He's an experienced hunter. So he knows wandering around the dark in rugged terrain with predators lurking is a pretty bad idea.
Yeah.
So he decides to do what any smart hunter would do, and he climbs up a tree to stay out of reach from anything that might want to have him for dinner, like a bear or a cougar even. And it seems like a pretty solid plan. So he's up in this tree. He's settling in for the night, and he sees what he thinks, initially, is a search helicopter off in the distance. He's stranded and needs some help, so he starts to signal to it. But here's the thing. This wasn't a helicopter. What he saw was something entirely different, and it was not friendly. Over the next 12 hours, Don found himself in what can only be described as a personal war against beings that seemed intent on abducting him. Get this, Tyler. Don and his family kept this story under wraps for decades.
Yeah.
He didn't even let anyone mention his name in relation to the incident for over 40 years. Today, we're going to be talking about the Cisco Grove UFO Incident.
Yeah, this is one of my all-time favorites. surprisingly, it's not really, I mean, I wouldn't consider it like an A-team event, even though I think it has all the makings of one, and it should be more widely known. But if I'm being honest, like, this is like the perfect plot of a movie, like especially an 80s movie.
Yes, dude. It's got elements of what we kind of talk about in a lot of our shows, where it's like, you're out in the woods, it's scary. It does feel 80s in the sense that there's like some lights kind of, I imagine, peering through the trees. This is at a time period when technology is still sort of interesting. He's climbing up into a tree to protect himself. This is even before things start to happen. And it's got elements of, horror. There's elements of, well, you'll just see. It reminds me of some of my other favorites that we've talked about. And to be honest with you, I can't even believe it's taken us this long to talk about this one.
Yeah, same.
Right? I mean, it's wild.
Yeah.
Enough about why this is our favorite one. Let's start talking. Let's dig a little bit deeper into the details about this incident, because as I think we have come to love it, especially me recently. You knew about it, but I think our listeners are going to love it just as much as we do. All right, so picture this. It's September 1964. Rewind the clock 60 years, folks. And Don, who worked as a welder and painter for the Aerojet General Corporation, goes on this bow hunting trip with his two friends, Vincent Alvarez and Tim Trueblood. Again, going back to what Tyler said, even the names sound like they're from a movie.
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, they head out to Cisco Grove, which is about an hour northeast of Sacramento, California. Now, at the time, it was actually illegal to hunt with firearms, which is about as California as it gets. But Don was fine with that because he was actually a better shot with a bow anyway. Don was originally from Arkansas, but he'd been living in Sacramento working on rockets and missiles and pretty serious stuff like surface-to-air missiles, stuff that around that time was pretty high-tech and, forward-thinking in terms of technology. Anyway, on this trip, he ends up getting separated from his buddies, like I said, and both of these guys, I believe, were co-workers as well. So he's up on this ridge, and they're kind of down below. And at some point, they just kind of lose track of each other. Again, just a friendly reminder, this is 1964. This wouldn't exactly happen this way nowadays necessarily, because more than likely, if you're out there hiking, you've got either your cell phone or maybe even a GPS device or GPS, a satellite phone, something like that are much more cost effective than they would have been, back then, of course.
Oh, yeah.
They didn't have them. But anyhow, they've kind of lost track of each other, just separated. They don't want to shoot each other with arrows either when they're trying to get some deer or something.
Oh, yeah.
It's not exactly life or death at this point, but daylight is beginning to fade. And so Don realizes, you know what, I'm probably not going to be making it back to camp that night, which I still can't imagine that at that moment he really even had any sort of internal panic about. I think it was just kind of like, it is what it is. I'll just kind of set up something here, not a big deal. So just like any experienced hunter or outdoorsman, he's going to set things up. He decides, I can just make a shelter up in the tree. I'll climb up there. That'll, keep me safe from any sort of ground predator that cannot climb. I didn't do the homework on the biology here, but I'm thinking Sacramento. I'm not sure what kind of bear population they've got, but there are some bears, like I think grizzly, right, that don't climb.
Oh, right.
Black bears here in Georgia do, however.
And real fast.
So this wasn't some big, huge, massive tree. I know if you're from another part of the world and you're listening to this, when you think California, you may think, oh, redwoods. They're as big as buildings, It wasn't something like that. It was just tall enough. I think it said that the first branch was about 12 feet off the ground. So he climbs up, and one of those big branches, 12 feet off the ground, he managed to climb up there, thinking it'll keep him safe from the mountain lions, the bears, all that. And this is about when things begin to get a little weird. So sometime between 9 and 9:30, Don notices that light in the sky. Again, at first he thinks, oh man, my buddies, I guess, were worried. They somehow contacted a search team, and they're searching for me. And he thinks it's a search helicopter.
Yeah. But
where he begins to realize that something's off is really how it's moving. Instead of, the thing about helicopters, they're really amazing, is they have a very smooth flight pattern, I guess. Like they fly pretty smoothly. Yes, of course they can maneuver pretty incredibly, but he noticed that this thing was going up and down, like almost like someone was waving a flashlight. So he thinks, well, maybe I'm just kind of, not seeing it correctly. Maybe my perception is a little off. Maybe it is like the searchlight on the copter that's moving, and, maybe I'm just seeing it wrong. So he figures, you know what? I'll signal it. He climbs down, lights some little small fires on top of the rocks, and starts to wave and shout, trying to get the pilot's attention. And by the way, if you're ever stranded in the woods, I think even recently someone was rescued mainly because of the fires that she had lit. And I think she'd been missing for like a month or something.
Which, by the way, this is I don't know. It's weird to think like how bad of an idea this time it ends up being.
Right. Because, again, in the back of your mind, you're thinking, this is someone looking for me that's here to rescue me.
Right.
And so I need to signal them. So the light begins to move towards him. And again, he starts to realize that something's not right. The thing is moving way too fast. And here's the kicker. With a helicopter, you can, especially like, again, I'm going to keep on saying it, 1964. Think of, when I think of the 60s and I think of helicopters.
MASH.
Well, no, there's that little bit of, yes. But I'm thinking of, like a Huey, the Vietnam era helicopters, like, you can hear it coming from forever away.
Yeah.
The Vietnam vets would always say when they heard that sound, it was like, got the like angel trumpets, they knew somebody was coming for them.
Well, and also keep in mind, like, it is important to remember that this guy, like, was around all types of like military stuff. Like he was like, I think he like painted and also had some like design sort of input on like missile systems and like, and so this is a very common thing that he's like, he wouldn't be surprised with seeing like a helicopter or any sort of aircraft that was common.
Right. And for that matter, helicopters are also just common enough that I think it's safe to say that any of us, you and I, Tyler, anybody listening, can recognize that sound.
Oh, yeah.
So here's where it gets eerie for him, especially. There's zero sound.
Yeah.
It's completely silent. And it's moving in very rapidly.
Yeah.
So it's got this light on the front of it, like a headlight, if you will, but it's small. And then to him, it didn't really make sense. Then it gets closer. And then that's when he sees that this isn't a helicopter at all. It's something much darker.
Yeah.
Like somehow even absorbing the light around it. There was this almost instinctual sort of feeling that he got that just came, rushing over him that this wasn't human-made. And like you said, he's been working on this cutting-edge missile tech. He's pretty clued in on what the government is capable of.
Yeah, for sure.
So he knows he's privy to being realistic about what they can do, what they can't do.
Well, didn't he also, like, because of the lack of any sort of noise, like, didn't he think for a minute, well, maybe it's like the moon or something, just because he was so confused?
Yeah. So later on, he kind of thinks about that in terms of the light, and I'll get to that too in just a second. But so it's super fast, silent, and clearly interested in him or has noticed the fires that he'd set. So his natural instinct is that he just bolts back up this tree, thinking, okay, if I can hide up here, somehow camouflage myself, this thing will just kind of see the fires, maybe move along. Heck, maybe I'll get a better look of it because of the ambient light from the campfires. So he's just camouflaged. He's up in this tree, just starting to just freeze, I mean, he's just kind of like very still, hoping that this thing is going to pass by. Here's the problem. It doesn't. In fact, it gets even closer. And that's when Don sees something that just sends a chill down his spine. 3 windows, staggered apart from one another in a way that just doesn't even make sense to him. It's almost like a checkerboard pattern. And through these windows, he gets this sense that this craft is massive, maybe 150 feet long. And to put it into some perspective here, that'd be like a 14-story building lying on its side.
Yeah.
Right? 150 feet long is no joke. We've got these like power lines at the back of our neighborhood, kind of out towards this cove area where the power line goes across this cove to the other side of the lake. And on those big giant power lines, they have it marked off, like 100 feet, 200 feet, 300 feet. And until you're really kind of like standing underneath something that has markings on it that sort of show you in real time and in context of your surroundings how high 150 feet would be.
Oh, yeah.
Like, and imagining that being the length of something, it's pretty crazy.
And to be like just dead silent.
Right. And what's up with those windows? He said that they kind of shimmered, almost like aluminum foil. And he couldn't make out the full shape, but it was blocking out the stars, meaning to him that it was huge. And then something else. A smaller craft. It was what Don would later call or refer to as a module. It emerges from one of the windows, almost like a scout ship.
Yeah.
And this one is sort of more traditional in I guess, shape and design. It looks more like, small dome on top, flashing lights, more of like I don't know about saucer, but, similar to that kind of stuff. 1950s.
Yeah.
UFO vibes. It shoots out of this bigger ship and lands on a hill not too far away from Don. Now, real quick, here's where I want to stop for a second. Let me ask you, Tyler, what would you do at this point?
After these messages, we'll be right back.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Forget the frustration of picking commerce platforms when you switch your business to Shopify, the global commerce platform that supercharges your selling wherever you sell. With Shopify, you'll harness the same intuitive features, trusted apps, and powerful analytics used by the world's leading brands. Sign up today for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/tech, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/tech.
This episode is brought to you by Experian. Are you paying for subscriptions you don't use but can't find the time or energy to cancel them? Experian could cancel unwanted subscriptions for you, saving you an average of $270 per year and plenty of time. Download the Experian app. Results will vary. Not all subscriptions are eligible. Savings are not guaranteed. Paid membership with connected payment account required.
George Clooney and Brad Pitt's new movie Wolves is on Apple TV Plus September 27th.
That's where I want you to be now.
So if you want to see George Clooney and Brad Pitt, go to Apple TV Plus.
You got to start the story there.
Or if you want to see Brad Pitt and George Clooney, go to Apple TV Plus.
I am enjoying the show.
And if you want to see their new movie Wolves,
You can't do it, I'm going to help you out. I can do it. So do it.
definitely go to Apple TV Plus.
Admit it, it's cool. Okay, fine, it was very cool.
Wolves, streaming September 27th on Apple TV Plus. Rated R.
Whoa. Landing an account this big will totally change my landscaping business. It's gonna mean hiring more guys and more equipment and new trucks for the new guys to drive the new equipment in. I don't know if I'm ready.
You can do this, and Ford Pro FinSimple can help. Our experts are ready to make growing pains less painful for your business with flexible financing solutions that meet the needs of your business today when you need them. Get started at fordpro.com/financing.
Feel your max with Brooks Running and the all-new Ghost Max 2. They're the shoes you deserve, designed to streamline your stride and help protect your body. Treat yourself to feel-good landings on an ultra-high stack of super comfy nitrogen-infused cushion that takes the edge off every step, every day. The Brooks Ghost Max 2. You know, technically, they're a form of self-care. Brooks, let's run there. Head to brooksrunning.com to learn more.
Pretty cool place, if you're a Martian.
Or a vampire. You think you really know what's happening around here, don't you? We're fighters for truth, justice, and the American way.
Hey, this is Woody.
And this is Tyler. And you're listening to That Would Be Rad.
And now, back to our show.
Man, I don't know, because I would probably be a lot like Don.
Just being still, right?
Yeah, I mean, because especially if you're looking through the context of like the 60s and through that lens, you're not thinking, well, maybe they have some sort of like, FLIR, like thermal cameras. They can't, or thermal like goggles or vision in any way. So like, that wouldn't be what your mind would go to. So of course they can't see me because it's dark. So I'm just going to hide in this tree. I'm going to be super still, and they'll never find me. That's probably, I would do the exact same thing probably.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would, in terms of just like sitting still for a minute, because I think we joke about it quite a lot, on the show back and forth and that kind of thing about what I would do and what you would do. But I think for the most part, anybody listening wouldn't just like jump down and just be like, "What's up, guys? Let's party. Charanga." You know what I mean?
Charanga. Yeah.
So kind of making sure we're all on the same page here, just to recap. The ship that came wasn't just moving fast. It was like beyond anything he could really comprehend. It's just like this impossible speed covering huge distances instantly and silently. Normal physics just aren't really applying to this thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, real quick, what, because I don't remember this, what happened to the bigger sort of, I guess mothership, if you will?
So I think it basically kind of, just say, hey, man.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Okay, so for a little while, he felt like, okay, I think I'm safe up here. I'm being still. I don't think they noticed me. Maybe they noticed the fires, but they don't know that I'm up here. Then that smaller craft launches out that he called the module. There's this really incredible book called Aliens in the Forest.
Yeah.
And it's by Neo Torres and Ruben Uriarte. And in their book, they refer to the big ship as a mothership and then the smaller one as a scout ship. Now, at the time, however, that terminology wasn't in Don's vernacular. It wasn't in the zeitgeist even. He wouldn't have thought of that. But in that book, they kind of make reference to those two things as such.
Yeah, because in 64, there wasn't, as far as like space travel and that kind of stuff, you wouldn't have had any sort of context.
Right. I mean, there's UFOs and flying saucers,
yeah.
but not like the concept of like there's one big mothership and then it's going to send out a bunch of small ones.
Right.
And I mean, like, it wasn't even, well, anyhow.
Well, the funny thing is, and I've never even thought of this until now, but it's almost like, sort of like a dinghy. If you're on like a massive ship and then you sort of park and then, hey, we got to get into shore in a smaller boat.
Right. Yep. Yeah, because it's more maneuverable. Right. You can get into smaller situations. Yeah. I mean, exact same concept.
Yeah.
And so he notices that the small one sort of lands, I think they said something like a half mile away. And again, this is a very thick with foliage. It's rugged terrain, big time rugged terrain in this area. I mean, dense forest, okay? But it's far away, but not too far away.
Yeah.
And he kind of lost sight of it initially, the small ship, that we'll just call it the scout ship. The scout ship, he sort of loses sight of it. And the reason why he knows kind of where it was, basically, was that he started to hear something, or maybe some things, coming through the brush.
Yeah. Although, I don't know, maybe I'm retracting my opinion. I didn't realize that the scout ship parked like a mile and a half away.
Or a half mile away.
Oh, wow.
And it's just an estimation, Yeah,
that's pretty close to still.
Yeah. And, because it still has to kind of like land somewhere, so it's got to find something. Okay, he kind of loses sight of it. In that book, Torres and Iriarte estimate that the windows on that mothership could have been up to 600 square feet or so. And so basically based on that, big enough, the scout ship was big enough to carry a crew or something, humanoid or not. Okay. So he starts to hear sort of like something making their way through this brush and through the forest coming towards him. The noises are getting closer and closer. He said that it went on for about like maybe 5 to 10 minutes. And then one of them finally appeared from the trees. It was short, stocky, and looked like me in 8th grade. No. And it was wearing kind of what looked like maybe a uniform of sorts. And at its face, he couldn't really make out. It was just like this black void except for these big, sort of dark eyes. Almost like it was, in his own words, wearing welder's goggles.
Yeah, and that's important because he was like also a welder. So that's sort of the comparison that his mind would go to.
Right, and immediately it makes me think of the two dudes.
Yeah, the lead
on
mask.
the mountain. Yeah, the lead mask. And if you didn't listen to that episode, you can hear it.
Hear more about this on That Would Be Rad, Season 4, Episode 23, The Enduring Mystery of the Lead Mask Case.
So imagine that, dude. You're looking down and then sort of like coming out of the area that you think there's this clearing where I guess he's made these fires, and then just like barely lit by these fires. You see this creature, or you see this humanoid that seems to be wearing some sort of uniform. It's got these dark eyes that, it reminds you of the welder's goggles that you use.
Yeah.
And they keep getting closer. But he said that what really freaked him out was how they were acting. It's like they seemed curious, almost distracted, like they were studying the plants or something as they moved toward him. Like they would like reach down and like, that kind of thing. Then two of them came right to the base of the tree where he was. And they just stood there, staring straight up at him with those dark eyes.
Dude.
Now, dude, can you imagine how terrifying that would be?
Yeah, that's the part that, I don't know, there's something about that is so scary. The idea of like you think you're completely hidden, and then suddenly the thing that you're hiding from just looks up and just stares at you.
Yeah, I know. And I imagine it to be like, okay, so they got there quickly, and then they're sort of just like, in a way, sort of unpredictably, sort of like looking around, looking at leaves and stuff, and then two of them just kind of slowly get to the tree and then just slowly look up at you, just like dramatically slow. That is terrifying.
Yeah.
And to add insult to injury here, he said that their faces were really hard to make out, but just those eyes and maybe like a flat nose. Then, this part just sent me over the edge in terms of freaky.
Yeah.
He started to hear what he like theorized really to be them communicating. He said it was almost like the sound of doves cooing or owls hooting. And every time they'd make that noise, they'd take a new action, like they were getting instructions from the mothership potentially. Eventually, more of them showed up. Now we're talking maybe about 6 of them. And they're just, standing there sort of communicating back and forth. Again, I don't know why. Maybe it's because, we've talked a little bit about like the screen memory thing with owls and how like, I'm just saying like, if it's not, they're not speaking English. So immediately to me, your mind is like, okay, I'm going to rationalize this. I'm trying to like think if like Anne was up in that tree, she'd be like, they're not aliens. That wouldn't even pop in her head. She would just think these are just people. Next thing you know, they're like making bird sounds?
Yeah.
That's just so weird and bizarre, dude.
And that's kind of interesting because there have been other, and I don't know, I could be getting my stories mixed up, but I want to say that even Whitley Strieber, like, he wrote Communion and, later would become like a big writer and a big figure in like the UFO sort of ET field. But I feel like maybe it was him that was sort of talking how they were almost communicating with like little like clicks. And so I wonder, because I read that too, where they're talking about almost like like doves or like almost like pigeons, I would imagine, in a way. And I wonder if that was sort of a similar kind of thing.
Well, and it to me, it seems that way. And I think it's pretty cool that, you know, he potentially thought of that either at the time or later, that this must be their form of communication. And it's almost like they were getting it from, you know, a commander somewhere else.
Which that's interesting. I mean, I wonder why he thought that.
Well, here's kind of why. Because, again, at this point, what's happened is you've got these smaller sort of humanoids looking very interested in the plants, in the plant scenario that's there, you know, the leaves and everything. Yes, two of them kind of like notice him, but they're not actively trying to like climb up the tree, which, can you imagine that would be absolutely terrifying. Just like slow climbing toward him. Holy moly.
Yeah.
Anyway, he's kind of thinking at this point, okay, these creatures or humanoids, whatever, these people, these things aren't here for me because they've not come up here to get me yet.
Right.
And the others are kind of still doing like little tasks. Well, he's kind of hoping at this point, maybe they're just going to collect some samples, get some leaves or whatever, and get the heck out of here.
Well, real quick, because I don't remember reading this, but so are you saying that the other ones were like, so there's a few that are looking up at him, but then are the other ones currently still kind of collecting
like foraging.
samples?
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
All right. And again, he's just thinking, oh, they're just going to collect samples. They're going to leave. They're just kind of like observing me, making sure that I'm not going to be aggressive towards them potentially. Maybe they're relaying information about me to whomever. And this is where it gets next level again. Something else arrives. This time, much bigger.
Yeah.
With these glowing red eyes.
Eyes like fire.
Coming from, yes.
Yeah.
Coming from a totally different direction. At this point, Don calls it a robot. Now, previously, the little like creatures to him look like they just have a uniform on. They're much more, not pliable, but sort of like
organic, maybe.
Yeah, well, and in their movement especially, right? There's not a lot of like jerky movements or like clunky. This time, though, he says this one was much different. It didn't move like the others. It's more mechanical, clunky. Its face had this large mouth.
Yeah.
With a jaw that looked like it had a hinge.
Basically the Iron Giant.
Exactly. That's I think what is really depicted best when describing this thing. And I think in the book they have some illustrations and one of them kind of looks just like the Iron Giant in a way.
Which kind of makes you think, I mean, this was 1964. I mean, we did have like, you know, your sort of 50s, I mean, now we call it like retrofuturism, but like we did have that like 50s sci-fi and like that sort of, not mandible, that's not the right word, but like that sort of hinged mouth. I mean, I think that was something that would have been like, there's a possibility he could have like seen that in like 50s sci-fi stuff.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, it's like, well, or like was some of this stuff sort of inspired by what he's seeing?
Yeah.
I mean, we talk about that kind of stuff all the time. But,
oh, yeah.
That it is interesting. Also, just real quick, the idea of like what he sort of described as like the welding goggles on like the smaller ones. I'm wondering if those were just kind of, I mean, I've always just sort of looked at that as like, oh, well, they were just kind of like alien grays. And he didn't have like any, like
he didn't have any prior reference points.
No reference points. And so maybe because of like the fire that he had set up, maybe he's just seeing that like
reflective,
liquidy reflection in their like big eyes. And that's, you know, maybe, I don't know.
Maybe, yeah. Well, okay, so this one, which is, you know, remarkably different, obviously different, I guess.
Yeah.
Stops right under the tree and just stands there motionless. Now, here's the other part that is, it's just like you said, dude, this is the perfect movie. Someone's going to make it, and we're going to be mad that it wasn't us.
Yeah.
Because remember those signal fires?
Yeah.
At this point, they've died down tremendously. And all that's left are these glowing embers. Now, for those of you that camp, you'll know what I mean by this. It's interesting because when you're out in the woods, you know, and the only thing that you've got as far as ambient light is either the moon or the stars. But if you're inside of like a relatively densely, you know, populated area in terms of trees and tree cover and that kind of thing, you know, a fire is going to light that area pretty well. And then once it gets down to embers, though, even when you're in your tent, it does provide a little bit of ambience. But because of how dim it is, boy, it really it's freaky. You know, it's that same sort of thing. Like sometimes I'd rather it be pitch black than I would for there just to be a little bit of light and let my imagination sort of fill in the gaps.
Yeah, I agree.
And so he's looking down there, and in the dim light of these dying embers, he gets a better look of the robot's hand. And really how he describes it, dude, is like this old, almost medieval metal gauntlet. Then this thing comes over to the base of Don's tree, stands there, slowly raises its hand to its mouth, and suddenly a white vapor starts coming out, rising up toward Don. Now again, he's like 12 feet up in this tree. He doesn't smell anything, but whatever it was, apparently completely knocks him out. He slumps over, unconscious.
Which, by the way, and I don't mean to keep stopping here, but
no, you're good.
But I mean, this is sort of the podcast. But it's such a weird thing to me that, like how does that happen? It's almost like was it like a how would I describe it? Like it's almost like was the gas like some sort of like able to like target? Because if he's so high in a tree, like, or was it just like so potent that it?
No, because like as long as it's a gas that is, you know, quote unquote lighter than air, then it would float up towards.
No. I understand that. I'm just saying, like,
dude, how hilarious would it be if this robot's like, and just the gas is like heavier? They didn't calculate the atmosphere correctly, and it just like falls down. And the robot's like.
And it knocks all the little ones out.
Oh, man. Error.
No. I'm saying, like, how, if he's this high in the tree, how does, like it just seems like, you know, gas.
Pretty forceful. Like,
yeah. I mean, yeah.
I mean, you know, there's all kinds of elements to it. You know, maybe they included some sort of, not accelerant, but, some sort of aerosol that would, you know, help it move further up. In any case, it knocks him out.
Yeah.
Now, I thought you were going to say how interesting it is that you don't really hear about this kind of stuff, or at least the person doesn't witness it in other alien accounts, dude. Except for like M. Night Shyamalan. In Signs. Remember? He alien like lifts up its hand and like some kind of gas or something. Yeah, knocks him out.
Interesting.
So I wonder if that's where he got that idea. But it is such a unique part of it all.
Yeah.
And I've got some ideas about why are there these two different types of beings or whatever in a little while. But
one thing that I thought of, and this is just like from working in like the operating room for a while, is it reminded me of like propofol, like the anesthetic.
Yeah.
Which is like, you know, milky, sort of white. I mean, granted,
we're viewing this through the human lens.
Exactly. That's what I was about to say.
I mean, we're talking about potential creatures that can traverse time and space. And then we're like, well, now how did they get that gas all the way up there?
Yeah. Well, I mean, but again, like, I don't know if you're seeing what I'm saying. I'm just saying, like, how is it that this sort of smoky substance sort of pours out of this robot's mouth, and then like within seconds, the dude, it's enough to like fill an entire area so that the dude's knocked out. Because he's like, what'd you say, 12 to 15 feet up?
He's like 12 feet up, yeah.
Yeah, like I just don't know how that's crazy to me.
Yeah, well, here's what's even crazier. So
we will return after these messages.
This episode is supported by FX's Grotesquerie, a new series from executive producer Ryan Murphy. Heinous crimes unsettle a small community, and the local detective feels these atrocities are eerily personal, as if someone or something is taunting her. Starring Niecy Nash Betts, Courtney B. Vance, Leslie Manville, and Travis Kelce. FX's Grotesquerie premieres September 25th on FX. Stream on Hulu.
America's future can be determined by our dreams and our visions.
It was very intense, bright light.
For over 200 years, there have been reports of giant man-like creatures.
From another dimension, another world, I don't know.
The most intriguing mystery on the North American continent.
This is Joshua Cutchin, and you're at my home for weirdness. That would be rad.
Well, here's what's even crazier. So the only reason he knows it knocks him out is because he kind of like, he's like waking up, doesn't know how long later. He starts dry heaving from whatever the gas was, which again can happen with anesthetic.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And as he's trying to gather his thoughts, like, what the heck is happening here with it? The dadgum robot comes back and does it again. And dude, it happens over and over. This thing keeps on getting sort of like escalated, and it's just knocking him out. It's not working. Knocking him out. It's not working.
Didn't he almost fall out of the tree?
Yeah. So like, of course, dude. Like, think about being up in a tree and just like, when someone is truly knocked out, your body's limp.
Oh,
you're
just dead weight. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So finally, one of the more recent sort of like he's kind of come to again. He's doing something that I think it would have been like, this is the part where, like I said earlier, I would have stayed still.
Yeah.
I would have thought, if I'm quiet, they'll just pass by. I'm not going to try anything crazy. There's a point, I think, in all of us where it changes. There's a flip. There's a switch that gets flipped from flight to fight.
Yep.
And at this point, Don is like, I'm going to take matters in my own hands. I'm putting fate. My fate is going to be decided by me, So he decides to make a move. And even though he was scared out of his mind, he couldn't justify shooting the smaller humanoid creatures. And they didn't seem to be directly threatening him, but the robot, this one that's spraying him with this gas, that's the one he's going to go for.
Which that the robot was like being controlled by those other ones.
So he picks his target, he draws his bow back, and he fires.
Yeah.
The arrow hits dead center on the robot's chest. It pushed the robot back a few feet, but it also like ricocheted off, causing this bright flash of light that he later describes as like an arc welder or something, right? And again, he's just utilizing his own sort of frame of reference.
Which to me, that's always been an interesting part, because originally I just thought, it was, it was pitch black and it just created like a little spark. But like him being an actual welder, for him to say that it was like, kind of like an arc light type thing, like I wonder if there's some sort of almost like a force field type something happening,
Yeah, I thought that too.
I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah, no, again, he's not really, I don't think he would know the concept of force field at that point.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And so it's interesting too, like us, it's so easy for us now in 2024, 60 years later, for us to kind of think about things in such a different way. Maybe it was a force field or whatever. He's just like, man, that thing bounced off and it sparked and, whatever. So the robot, gets kind of pushed back a few feet away, but it didn't stay back for long. Don ended up firing all 3 arrows that he had, and every time the same exact thing would happen. The robot would get pushed back, there was this flash, and then it would just come right back. Now, I made that noise with my mouth. I'm not sure if he could hear all of like the little like gears and servos and all that stuff. But the smaller beings, though, throughout this, didn't retaliate. They just kind of backed off a little bit and never engaged directly. So at this point, he's starting to get desperate. I fired all 3 of my sure things at this thing. It did knock it back, but it didn't seemingly harm it enough to do anything. And what's interesting is, and something I forgot to mention, the robot did initially kind of sort of kick at the embers of his signal fire. And so at this point, Don sort of thinks to himself, well, maybe I can use this fire to kind of keep it away.
Well, real quick, are you saying that like almost as if he didn't know or
like, what is it? Or is it dangerous?
Yeah,
I'm not sure. So it's just like he thinks, okay, maybe it doesn't like fire or whatever. Like I think maybe it was kicking at it to kind of put it out. I'm not sure. So he grabs his book of matches that he has, lights it up, and tosses it down. The robot does back up. Then he sets his hat on fire and throws it down. Now, you know how I know it wasn't a Stetson?
Because he set it on fire.
He would have just been like, I'd rather just die.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The robot retreats again, this time about 50 feet. But every time the fire went out, it'd come right back. This thing was relentless, dude. He didn't even have enough brush nearby to start a bigger fire. At this point, he's thinking, well, maybe, this would be the only time a wildfire started by a guy would be okay. And so he starts burning everything he's got, pieces of clothing, anything that would burn. He even sets fire to his hunting license, cash, his wallet. By the end of it, he's literally down to nothing but a t-shirt, jeans, and shoes. When he ran out of things to burn, he pretty much knew he'd made his last stand here. But still, he thought, okay, maybe I can get higher in the tree. That way I can be out of range for this gas weapon that I just keep on getting dosed with. So he climbs up another few feet and straps himself into the trunk with his belt so that he doesn't fall out.
Yeah.
Sure enough, the robot comes back to the tree and tries again with that vapor. This time it worked, but only for a little while. In other words, it wasn't as potent. And he wakes up and notices, okay, this time only a few minutes have passed. Now, again, I'm not really sure how he's gauging that. But anyway.
Yeah.
Now, though, things are a little bit different, bro. Because the same smaller beings that had nothing, that weren't doing anything before, now they're down there and they're trying to climb the tree. Every time now here's what's weird, dude. And we kind of talked about this. Well, we've talked about it a lot lately, I feel like, when this kind of stuff happens. So they start to climb up the tree, but when they notice that he's awake and noticing them, they stop and back down. He said that it seemed like they hadn't really figured out how to get up the tree yet. Instead, they were kind of just like clumsily helping each other up, I kind of picture like a group of elementary school kids like, here, like put your foot on my hand. And
right.
Then like, almost like, and to me, I know you mentioned that they remind you of Alien Grace. To me, they remind me of, what are the little guys in Star Wars, on Tatooine?
They have like the little robes and like their eyes are lit up. Jawas. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so it reminded me of Jawas, kind of like, I don't really know.
Making like little pigeon
Yeah, exactly.
Although one of the things that I do wonder about this is I wonder if he would have decided to fire an arrow at one of them, if that would have like made them leave.
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because that's not exactly what happens, but basically they're not really successful in climbing, but Don is basically at this point throwing whatever he has left down at them, even coins at one point.
Yeah.
They would just kind of like step back, and then the robot would come in again and try to, and like shoot gas up there, knock him out again. Don at this point is sort of violently shaking the tree as best he can, trying to stop them from climbing. He starts keeping track of how long he's been knocked out each time based on where they were when he wakes up, but they're not getting very far. So again, when he's knocked out, they're climbing. As soon as they notice that he's awake, they're like, uh-oh, and they go back down.
Also, I haven't thought of this until now, but I wonder if, does it, so what time of, well, I guess it's like this time of year, but like does it say if it was like kind of cold or?
Yeah. So it is very cold.
Oh, okay. Well, the reason I ask is I wonder if it's not even really like a gas, if it's some sort of like energy weapon or sound, something, and that's just like, because if it is cold, if it's just almost like steam or like you can see your breath. I wonder if it's like something like that, and it's not, and he's just, seeing through 1964 lenses of like,
right.
Oh, there's like this smoke coming out of its mouth, but like maybe its mouth was like emitting some sort of frequency that was like knocking him out.
Yeah. Yeah, no kidding.
I mean, I don't know.
Idea.
Maybe.
Yeah, no, I like that actually.
It's just the whole gas thing just feels so weird to me. But
although the sound would travel faster or like further than the gas, so it being less potent when he got higher.
Well, anyway. I mean, the sound, if it's like a sub-frequency, it's just knocking him out every time.
Yeah, but it's not as effective when he was higher up.
Oh.
Anyway, he's like, again, throwing everything at him. Like, I think he had like a World War II style canteen. And it is funny that you mentioned, again, he's sort of looking at things through his lens and gas and thinking like, okay, World War II, World War I. He's in that age range. They would have known about those kind of things. So anyways, he throws a canteen at him. He is just doing anything and everything. He even imitates some coyotes that he had heard, hoping to convince these robots and this robot and these creatures that he's something else, like
make yourself big.
Make yourself big, but also like, oh, they heard those noises too in the distance. Maybe more of this type of creature in the tree is coming to sort of back him up. But they didn't care. It didn't faze them. The night drags on, over 11 hours of darkness on September 4th and 5th in 1964, apparently. And it's so cool that you can like look at that data.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, dude. I mean, 1 hour of this would be terrible. I mean, he's just absolutely exhausted at this point. Anytime you're out in the woods anyway, just doing normal things like just walking, forget about trying to hunt and doing all that. But now he's climbed up and down this tree a couple of times. He's super stressed out. His adrenaline can only help him out so long. And that's going to, wear him out. Sounds like Tyler's already worn out over there, just yawning like a mother. And so, like, he'd fired arrows. He's thrown everything that he's had. He's lit his clothing on fire. He's, cold. He keeps on getting gassed unconscious. And he still hasn't gotten any rest. At one point, he even reportedly thought about throwing himself off the cliff that the tree sort of partially grew over.
Oh, wow.
But then, of course, he thought of his wife and daughter and kind of snapped back into reality. Now, again, it's going to get wild here. He looks down, and he sees not just one, but two of these robots now standing at the base of the tree. Listen to this, dude. They're facing each other, and then suddenly there are these bright arcs of white light that start flashing between them. To him, it looked like, electrified plasma, almost like they were sharing information or something.
Yeah, dude. It's got to be like some sort of force field type energy transfer kind of thing.
Yeah, to me, like, I immediately picture, there's so many things that we in 2024 sort of just like take for granted in terms of how it all works, Basil. You know what I mean? Like, you plug a thumb drive in and there's this transfer of information. You send an email from your phone, goes to someone else. Imagine now, though, if you could see that transfer of information.
Right.
And I think that's just such a cool idea and concept of these two, like, machines are transferring information not by speaking, but just like through like current, through this like plasma,
through the ether.
Basically. Yeah, it's just super cool.
You're saying it was almost like once the other one appeared, it was like, oh,
this is what happens. Here's the problem, though. That's what you would think, and that's a cool concept. But it turns out they were somehow potentially combining their power.
Oh boy, Captain Planet style.
Amping it up to release a lot more of that knockout gas. This time it was different. The gas, he said, was cold, really cold, and way more effective. And this time Don passes out cold.
We'll return after these messages.
There's something out there waiting for us. And it ain't no dead.
Hey, this is Bryce Johnson from the Bigfoot Collectors Club, and you're listening to Tyler and Woody on That Would Be Rad, because that is rad.
Now, luckily, if you remember, Don strapped himself into the tree using his belt, which, you know, I never wear a belt, dude. And that makes me, like, when I go camping, though, well, that's true. When I go camping, I tend to, because then I'll have, like, you know, my...
Get that thing on you.
My knife on me, yeah. And, you know, that kind of stuff. So he, thank God, strapped himself because he was just, like, knocked out. By the time he awoke, the sun was beginning to rise. And more importantly, the robots and those smaller beings were gone. He was completely alone, and...
What a weird feeling that had to be.
Well, dude, exactly. He starts to begin... So now he's up here. He is kind of, you know, piecing things together, you know. He's kind of like getting a bearing on his surroundings. Remember, this guy has basically been under attack for 11 plus hours. Freezing cold. Doesn't have anything on him anymore. He's thrown everything down. Doesn't even have anything to defend himself with at this point. And he's just woken up. He's strapped to a tree. He starts to question whether he was really in the tree the whole night. Uh-oh. I mean, obviously that's the easy answer. But when he wakes up, isn't that even like, again, you said, man, what a terrifying thing. You wake up, they're gone, you're strapped to a tree. But it's almost even more terrifying.
Yeah.
This story, this account is like one thing after another that just makes it scarier. It's like he gets this feeling like, man, have I really been here this whole time? Because what would have stopped them from getting me? It worked this time.
Yeah.
I was out cold, you know?
Yeah. I mean, my mind goes to like David Paulides, 411.
Well, yeah.
And like Willie Strieber even, where, you know, what could have happened if like that last little blast of gas or whatever they were doing, like really knocked him out. Like did something happen within those several hours? Yeah. You know, and then they just kind of tucked him back up in the tree.
Well, it reminds me too of, I know that, was it the Australian account? Maybe not, but there's these stories of people being removed from where they were.
Oh, yeah.
Placed back in their beds, in cars, and then having no memory of like, whoa, what?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's a huge abduction thing, especially with the 411. And what's weird about those is like, you know, sometimes when the abductee like wakes up, like their shoes will be on the wrong feet, or they'll have like their shirt will be on inside out. Right. Just weird little things that like, you know, if you believe in like aliens or ETs or whatever, like maybe those are little things that they wouldn't.
It's like the walk of shame, you know? You don't realize.
They do it on purpose.
Like, yeah. You're like, you know, emerging out of sorority row and, you know, oops, your shirt's on inside out. And you're like, huh? No. I've been here the whole time. Anyway.
Yeah.
So who knows? Like, did these beings do something like that? You know, the part of me that kind of thinks that they actually just probably gave up is because, like, they hadn't really figured out how to get up the tree just yet. You know?
Yeah, but it says that, like, the smaller ones were, like, climbing until he would, like, throw stuff or shake the tree.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's kind of weird.
And it's always funny in these kind of instances when you've got these creatures that come from somewhere else. Their technology is clearly better, and they can't just get a guy out of a tree, you know?
Yeah.
And I've got some ideas about that, too. So ultimately, though, that was Don's story. And it's not just interesting, but it's super interesting that there were a lot of investigators that actually believed it. I mean, we're talking like letters from like well-known astronomers. There's evidence that certain things happened enough so that like the military did get involved because that's who they reported it to. Like things like the Arrowhead, which was like broken at a 45-degree angle when they went and found it. And an interesting fact here, that Arrowhead ended up in, oh, God.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. You're talking about J. Allen Hynek?
Yes. His private, like, collection of stuff at the university.
Yeah.
And just how cool is that, dude? He had these, like, artifacts.
And if I'm recalling right, like, wasn't, like, the way that they had, like, wasn't he, like, visited by, like, you know, quote unquote, like, the government? And so they did they take his, like, canteen?
Yeah. That's what he had, actually. I think he had the canteen. Somebody had it. Anyhow.
Because it had,
the
like,
canteen had, like a split in it.
Yeah.
And I think he had, like, welded it or he'd fixed it or something.
Yeah.
And anyway, super interesting stuff because, like, theoretically, the beings that were down there picked it up and looked at it. You know, the coins that he threw down, they never found.
Yeah.
They found a bunch of, like, you know, half-burnt cigarette boxes and, like...
stuff out of his wallet.
Yeah, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Remnants of the things that he had thrown down there. But, you know, not the coins. You know, maybe the aliens took those with them and like, oh, I can buy a...
I mean, if we're being honest, though, like, you know, that seems like... Well, I don't know. I mean, it is... These cases are hard to not look at through, like, you know, human sort of lens, but that is interesting, yeah.
And I know this is another thing that I love about this story, dude. A lot of these are pretty quickly told, you know? Like, it took us about an hour to get through just the account.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so many of these are like, well, we were there, and then this happened, and then that's about it. And this is just super detailed and everything. And anytime, and we'll get to... Do we believe it? Do we not believe it? But anytime it's that detailed, I should say a lot of times, the people that are super skeptical will say, you know, this seems like a made-up story. But again, the main thing about that is what's the motive?
Years.
What is the motive behind it, right?
Yeah, right.
Seemingly it would be famous, get a book, get a movie, become rich, have some notoriety or something. It took him 40 years to go public with it. Now,
and even after 40 years, he still didn't want to...
Hated it. Yep.
He didn't want to put his name on it. So
I read on a blog where somebody commented on this story, and they're like, hey, and you know, again, who knows? You can't verify this person's identity. But they said, hey, this was my uncle, and he absolutely hated talking about this.
Yeah.
He hated that it was public. It was embarrassing to him. He felt ashamed.
Well, didn't give him like lifelong like PTSD too.
He had PTSD, dude. There's this account basically that his wife told where because of those anytime that he would hear like an owl in real life, he would just freak out. So his wife said that sometimes he'd wake up in the middle of the night, haunted by these memories, repeatedly muttering about the eyes that he saw.
Yeah.
He still went camping, you know, after all this. And when he heard an owl, he would become visibly agitated. He always made sure to return to camp before dark. Like he didn't stray very far. His wife said also that she remembered a time when they were camping with friends, including Vincent Alvarez and his wife. Remember, Vincent was one of the coworkers and buddies that he went on this trip with. Don suddenly became sort of uncharacteristically quiet and told Judy that he'd started to hear this buzzing sound in his ears.
That's common.
He then saw unusual lights on a distant ridge, and he felt like this deep-seated fear that they were coming for him.
Man.
Later, like when she, like, I guess he maybe had gone into a tent, and she just like went to check on him. He was putting a loaded handgun under his pillow inside their tent.
That's how I sleep. Yeah.
And she had never seen him do that before.
Yeah.
And so it's like, you know, if this all was a fabrication, you know, boy, he's going to some incredible lengths to sort of play the part really convincingly to people that aren't really, they're not telling anybody. You know what I mean? It doesn't even make sense.
Now, was it Alvarez, and I may be jumping ahead, but was Alvarez, wasn't there like one of his buddies, didn't he like corroborate like seeing the ship?
It was Alvarez. Yep, exactly. Well, he didn't see the ship, but he did witness at the same time in a different part of the forest where they were. Remember, because they were separated.
Yeah. Well, because he was kind of lost, wasn't he?
Yeah. They were all kind of just like away from each other.
Yeah.
And he did witness a large light in the sky with a smaller light trailing behind it. Again, very similar to what Don had described. And I believe that, actually, I have a direct quote from him. Alvarez said that he was trying to make his way back to camp when he saw this bright light streaking down from the sky. Initially, he thought it might be a slow-moving meteor, but after hearing his buddy Don's story, Alvarez quickly became convinced that he had seen the same UFO that Shrum described.
Wow.
He even signed an affidavit affirming that he indeed witnessed the same UFO. And he said, I have worked with Don for 5 or 6 years, and knowing him that long, I have no reason to doubt or question his integrity.
Wow.
So what an incredible sort of event, dude. And there's like, really, frankly, there's kind of a ton to unpack, but I kind of want to talk a little bit. I thought I was going to go into like maybe like, hey, the craft and this. I kind of just want to talk about things that it reminds me of, and also
like, what do we think?
My quick theory.
Yeah.
Okay, let me do the quick theory first.
Okay.
Well, not really theory, but just something that like I thought of while learning about this. First, I got to say something else that makes this story unique is that there's 2 different distinct type of creatures or beings.
But that's not actually not that uncommon. Yeah.
Well, oh, God, I love that even more.
Yeah.
So, but I'm just saying, like, when I think of things that this reminds me of, the red eyes, I think of flatwoods.
Yeah.
I think of Mothman even. I think of, I think there's some Bigfoot encounters where they see these red glowing eyes or green glowing eyes.
Which is also, this is a big thing that we've been into lately is like the Nephilim were called like the shining ones. And a lot of it was because it looked like fire was in their eyes. Jinn, you see a lot of this, which, I mean, I know that this doesn't necessarily tie in with this, but
hey, who knows?
But yeah, you never know.
And so maybe not as unique as I thought, a minute and a half ago, but still very interesting is what I'm saying.
I'm saying that because like with these like abductions, now the idea of there being like a sort of a more organic, like living being, and then there being like a robot, like that's not common at all. Like,
right.
This is actually one of the few stories that are like this, but there are typically the idea of like a taller one, or like a shorter one and the rest are tall, or like a taller one and the rest are short. It's like a hierarchy, I guess maybe you could say, like one's sort of in charge, and that is pretty common, especially with like the gray type encounters.
Yeah. Well, and it kind of made me think of this. So imagine like, there's this book that my brother basically said that I should read because I was looking for something, to listen to on Audible. And he told me about this book series. It's called Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky. Anyway, what it reminded me of was the fact that you've got these potential beings from somewhere else, whether that's another dimension, another planet, whatever. They have the capability to travel here. So often, I think, when we think of these things, we think of them as like they're all the same. Oh, right. Yeah. We don't think of them as like ranked or with different purpose or with different even job responsibilities.
Yeah.
And so in this instance, to me, the way it was described, it's like, okay, you've got like the sort of gatherers that are down there sort of collecting samples and interacting potentially with, we are only looking at 6 of them at the most. Maybe there's others in other parts of the forest. They're connecting like, oh, there's a squirrel. Oh, there's a, frog.
Yeah.
Here's some leaves. They notice this creature and they're like, oh man, this thing's, scanning. Oh, this one's too big.
Right.
They're radioing back to quote unquote headquarters or the mothership. That's when the big robot comes.
Yep.
And it's sort of like, it's not necessarily designed to be, it's not a soldier, right? It's still kind of like a clunky piece of machinery.
It's like a farm hand almost.
Yes, dude, that's a great example. Yeah. And so its ability to sort of knock out an animal, it only has that one, quote unquote, not weapon, but method.
Right.
It tries to knock him out. It's not working. They're maybe getting frustrated, and they're just kind of like, I mean, this thing, now it's starting to like shoot at us.
Yeah.
What in the world? We got to knock this thing out so we can just finish our work or take it back and study it, And so that's what I thought of here. It's like you've got these, the sort of more brilliant minds are out on the ship, or maybe even the military on that ship. And then you've got sort of like the, scientists, but even then sort of like just the interns.
Right.
On the ground, collecting the samples and using the farmhand robots to sort of protect themselves.
Do the dirty work.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because I was thinking the exact same thing. Like the idea, which this used to be such a much more popular sort of hypothesis regarding like aliens or ETs like visiting us is that idea of like, oh, well, they're just here to like explore and gather information and gather, that's where like the cattle mutilations and stuff. Oh, they're just gathering data. I've kind of gotten away from that, like a lot of people in the field have. However, with this, like, it is interesting because that's where my mind went to, of like, oh, well, this is just like they've done this a ton of times before, and this is just it. Like maybe the last time they did it, it was to like knock a raccoon out of the tree so they could study it, or like a squirrel, or
so many of the elements of this feels like that.
Yeah, like they and the last thing probably although I don't know, it is interesting that, well, it does make sense because he did basically light up a fire to signal for these things to come to him, which
is, in the dark of night in a remote area, it would be significant enough to notice.
Right.
And he was actively like yelling, making noise, waving things around.
Yeah. So for them, they're like, oh, this is just like another weird animal that's really loud. Yeah, I don't know. I do think that to me, like, it kind of reminds me a little bit of like the Travis Walton, like the Fire in the Sky movie, where I just think there's so much high strangeness involved that it's like, it's almost like too weird to not have elements of truth, if not completely true.
Right.
Yeah,
and again, it comes back to what's the motivation, right? What's motivating him to make up this elaborate story? Now, that's not to say that there aren't people that would do that or could do that. It's just then what followed in his life doesn't really match up with that being the true motivation. You know what I mean?
And usually that sort of narcissistic, like if you're narcissist enough to be able to, hey, I'm going to, fashion this story out of whole cloth and it's going to be this wild story, like the ego involved in that just doesn't really work for a person that's just quiet for 40 years and then doesn't even want to associate their name with a story.
Yeah.
It just doesn't, it doesn't match up to me.
Yeah. Not at all. And I think like a lot of they contacted the authorities this time, again, because of their, I guess, association with that company. They would have military contacts. They contacted like the closest Air Force base who investigated it all. My throat is just, I think I'm hitting the limit here. But the cool thing about the letter, and I think this doesn't really happen often, or at least we don't have access to it, him sending the letter and then them responding is pretty cool because now we have proof that at the very least he sent the letter. We have proof that these items existed because other people ended up with them. The Arrowhead, the canteen, that kind of thing. We have his friends that were also witnesses, but they were, apart. We have prominent astronomy professors locally that, studied the case and, again, considered to be very, very credible. Some of the things that the Air Force kind of told them essentially were kind of funny. Like some of them said that, well, I think there were some kids pranking you because back in, and I forget what the thing is. I read it and I wrote it down and I can't find it. But yeah, they thought there were some like teens pranking them. So even with that argument, like teens pranking them, right? A couple of things I forgot to kind of mention as well. When Don came back down there and left the site, there were these little footprints. And he described them as being smooth and very small, like a child, not like a real small child, but a juvenile wearing maybe a moccasin, like no tread. Anyway, it just, the funny thing was them saying, well, no, I think it's just, you got pranked. And just trying to imagine somebody in the dark, in the 60s, young kids going all the way out there and also so quickly sort of traversing that difficult terrain.
In the middle of the night.
In the middle of the night, in the dark, without flashlights.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense. The aircraft and stuff in the air doesn't make sense. Oh, well, maybe it was, maybe it was a helicopter. Zero sound.
Yeah.
you know?
Well, and also if, you know, J. Allen Hynek being involved, you know, that's like Project Blue Book. And, you know, that's where we get all these just ridiculous explanations of, oh, it was just swamp gas. Oh, it was just a barred owl. It was this. It was this. Like, just like, it's just such a gaslighting technique that, I don't know. I mean, I can't imagine the frustration of like, so you're already kind of dealing with this memory. You're dealing with like the PTSD, but then now you're having these, you know, these government officials who are supposed to be the experts are telling you, oh, you didn't experience it. You just experienced like kids pranking you all night long for like 12 hours in the middle of the night. It's just,
yeah, dude,
it's so dumb.
I mean, maybe it's just because I would have lost, you know, focus.
Yeah.
But after an hour, I would have been bored and be like, dude, can we get like, hey, can we get back, you know, Lucy said she's got one of those jazz cigarettes that I want to try out.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? It's the 60s, man.
Yeah, for sure.
So there's a couple things that it reminded me of. I already said kind of Flatwoods Monster. That's part of the reason the Flatwoods Monster account is one of my favorites, if not the favorite, is because I just love the idea of this strange marriage between biological material and technology.
Sort of like robotic kind of.
Yeah, robotics. And again, the glowing red eyes, you're out in the middle of the woods.
Yeah.
All of that stuff I just love. And so that's kind of what it reminded me of. And I'll tell you what else it reminded me of. A couple of the characters that we've talked about before on the show. The Mad Gasser.
Dude, I thought of the same thing.
And Spring Hill Jack.
Yeah.
They had some sort of mechanical elements and also
the like knockout gas. Yeah, I thought the exact same thing. That was in my notes too.
Hear more about these rad and strange characters on That Would Be Rad, Season 2, Episode 18, The Mad Gasser of Mattoon. And Season 2, Episode 19, Spring Hill Jack.
Yeah, there's also like a little bit of, there's a case that I cannot find. I looked forever, I cannot find it, but this idea of like, I think now they're kind of looked at as like robotic humanoids or something, but back in the day they were called like metal men. And, you know, we've covered the Falkville metal men case. And there's another one. It's not the Pascagoula incident. That's another one, which, you know, we're going to do a future episode. But there's like the arms were like, or the hands were like pinchers. But it talks about how they had like robotic mouths. And then there's another one that I swear was like, it had to be like late 60s or early 70s where it's another one of these sort of like metal men kind of thing, but I could not find it.
What's interesting about the metal men, Falkville specifically, and I mean, maybe I'm just kind of trying to connect the dots here.
Hear more about this on That Would Be Rad, Season 2, Episode 2, The Falkville Metal Man.
But that happened in Alabama, and listeners, I highly encourage you to go listen to that episode. Really cool story. But it happened on October 17th, 1973. So about 9 years after this. I know I joked about like, oh, am I trying to connect the dots? Sometimes I think that it's fair to sort of think, you know, and you also mentioned a lot of the thought process and theories about stuff has kind of shifted, whereas like back in the day, it was like, well, maybe they're just here to observe and collect. And then now our train of thought is this, and this. I'm kind of in that mindset now where like I think both can be true. And what I mean by that is like at different steps along the way, maybe there's, you know, either that has kind of evolved into, okay, we collected all the information we want. Now we want to, you know, do something else, whether that's infiltrate or genetically modify, whatever. Or we're witnessing different types of things coming from different areas that just happen to be like, sometimes they're observing and collecting, sometimes they're doing something bad. You know what I mean? And also on top of that, the reason I said, you know, making it stretch to connect the dots, potentially depending on what their mode of travel is, the concept of time that we're using could be different. You know, it could be that it's the same metal man in Falkville, Alabama, and it's 9 years later. But to them, it's just like, you remember yesterday, man? That crazy guy in the tree?
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Yeah, my thing with that is like, also it was hard for me not to think, well, what if like the robots were nothing more than like a suit? And it was just like another one of the smaller ones in this suit now that has this ability to, shoot out gas, and it's stronger, so it can like probably carry. It's taller. It can carry things back to the scout ship.
I mean, it's very James Cameron.
It's very well, and oddly enough, like the Transformers movie, the original animated. Those big like sort of mech suits they had.
Yeah,
yeah, it reminded me of that. But then like it's hard for me not to go into some of the areas that sort of the Jacques Vallée take, where, and this is sort of a Whitley Strieber thing too, where what if like none of this happened? What if it was far more strange than even this, and all of this was some sort of like screen memory type thing? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Maybe this is just like remnants of what happened.
Right. Well, or like, it's that idea that we used to talk about a whole lot, where specifically with like Sam the Sandown Clown, where, are we witnessing like the same thing when we're talking about sort of alien gray abductions and or like fairy abductions, which, we're back in the sort of 1800s. And because like our sort of zeitgeist or paradigm is shifting culturally with like sci-fi movies of the 50s and that kind of stuff, or is there that component where maybe are they able to manipulate what we're thinking, or are they changing themselves, to go from like, oh, well, they're just sort of like the fae or fairies and they're advancing technologically, or is it just sort of like a mask that they're slipping on so that we sort of accept these things?
Yeah. Did they shoot an email to like the next group and they're like, dude, this freaked him out?
I mean, kind of. I do think there is something kind of to that. That's.
I mean, we've joked about it before when we talk about like, do we live in the Matrix or whatever? And sometimes somebody just being like, imagine like, I think in a lot of different podcasts and just in general, like this idea of like elites, right? Imagine like some super wealthy, whatever the currency is, who is running the Matrix. They go there and they're like, dude, come on, man. Let me get in there and let me just stir some up.
Oh, yeah, dude.
You know what I mean? And then they're like, okay, no problem. And then they're like in this world, this simulation, and they're able to just do all kinds of stuff to mess with us. I mean, I'm not saying I believe that. I'm just saying it is interesting to think about it in those terms. And another theory that I think is interesting is that this guy and those two other dudes worked for, essentially a company that contracted with the military, right? What if, and I thought of this, maybe we talked about this before we got here in the studio, but what if these guys accidentally stumbled upon something that they weren't supposed to see? Because another aspect of his job and stuff, he would just be like, he would come home, he'd be like drenched in these like chemicals, man. Yeah. And his wife would have to like, they said like his clothes would almost be like yellow.
Oh, right.
Because of the stuff that they were working with and all that.
Yeah.
What if they were part of some bigger experiment? And what if those beings, those things weren't from another planet? What if they're our own military? Well, what if they were given some sort of drug and that, because look, I had some friends in high school that did some crazy, they would take hallucinogens and they would see some wild stuff, man, that they believed to be real, right? And so, like, maybe that's what happened.
Yeah, it's funny you said that because I thought the same thing. Like, what if, I mean, it kind of goes along the lines of like the screen memory idea that I had. Like, what if they were just regular humans and he's just sort of tripping out? Like, what if whatever this gas was sprayed before?
Yeah, or maybe like maybe the gas wasn't even real, dude. Somebody like I haven't heard a lot about True Blood. Maybe he slipped him some liquid LSD. The other guy, what's his name? Alvarez.
Yeah.
The other guy, Alvarez, felt so bad about the fact that this dude basically went on this bad trip and has basically mentally changed since. And it's just like, yeah, dude, he definitely saw that. I'll sign it because he just felt bad and guilty.
Oh, wow.
I mean, again, just a theory. Not saying that this story is not true. It's just that could be plausible because, some of the things that these folks would tell me, and it's like, dude, they were convinced like all kinds of stuff that they were seeing.
Yeah. Oh, dude. I mean, I do think that the idea of people that are working in these, I mean, especially in the 60s, you had this, you were still in the era of just absolute peak sort of patriotism and compartmentalization within these within the government, within these different areas. I mean, I think the greatest example of that is the Manhattan Project, where, nobody had a clue what they were doing because it was so compartmentalized. And I mean, Bob Lazar talks about this too. So it's that idea that
you had you had the blinders on, you had your one specific job, you weren't sure what the big picture was.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's maybe this guy was working on this little thing that was part of this bigger picture that was he was painting pieces that were part of the craft that he sees. So yeah, I do think that's interesting. I also like the idea that the little module, as he called it, maybe it was a drone ship type thing, and maybe this is right up your alley, but I did think that idea of we're out collecting data and we're collecting flora and fauna of Earth or whatever. That idea, I kind of stopped going down that road a long time ago, but I do kind of like the idea of what if it is an interdimensional thing, like crossing over from another dimension, or a time travel type thing, and they're coming from another time, another dimension to collect these samples, and maybe they're not even, maybe this Earth isn't even inhabitable, and maybe they were completely synthetic or robots to begin with, and they're just sort of part of the little drone ship.
Yeah.
Little data collectors.
Yeah. It's wild, man.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just such a cool story. It's scary. It's interesting. It blends. I mean, well, another thing about the time travel or dimensional piece is it's interesting to me that the coins weren't there. But the burnt litter and stuff was left behind. And then they took samples of plants and stuff. So it's man, maybe, if I went into another time or even another dimension, I would probably take some currency from that dimension.
Oh, yeah.
Just to be oh, man,
Yeah, because
it's from another place.
Well, and if they know anything about,
I'm the man from Tarid.
Yeah, exactly. If you know anything about, other Earth, these beings knew anything about, currency, you would know, typically you're going to have, your leaders are going to be on the coins, or your
buildings.
Yeah, whatever that linked to whatever that society's doing at the time. And yeah, I think that's a pretty cool thought. Yeah, I don't know, man. There is some real weird high strangeness with a story that does feel a little bit like Sam the Sandown Clown, and I think that's why you and I both love this story so much.
Yeah,
it's weird and it's cool, and it just doesn't feel, motivationally, like you said, it doesn't feel like he's trying to get something out of it. And I think I believe
except for psychological turmoil.
Yeah, and
I mean,
PTSD.
Yeah, exactly. It's that was the, that's what he got.
Yeah.
And so I don't know why you would make that up.
Oh.
Unless you're and I think this is also something easy that gets thrown around when these things happen. But realistically, and I've witnessed it firsthand, working at that mental health facility, if they are schizophrenic, they can see things that they believe is so true, man.
And maybe they are.
It can snap, and it can happen on the snap of a finger. I mean, there's this lady that I was talking to when I was helping out on the adult unit over there. And she was just, I mean, dude, I couldn't figure out why in the world is this lady here? She's perfectly normal. And she's like, I would like a cup of water or whatever. I'm like, no problem. I'll get you, go. I come back, dude, and she's talking to the television.
Yeah. But, I mean, like we've said, maybe the shamans of old were those people, and they were just, they're able to, actually get a glimpse behind the veil, This is something that I want to bring up selfishly, because Woody and I sometimes use this show and use our listeners as to gain expertise in other fields. So last night on the way home, I was driving and I saw something up in the sky. And I'm thinking, maybe it's a drone. I don't really know anything about drones. It looked, and I'm terrible at distances, just like I am with dates, but it was like perfectly still. I stopped in the middle of the road. You know, it was like sort of a side road, so nobody ever goes down the road. I turned off my car, absolutely zero sound. I didn't hear like a bzzz, like the drone sound. I couldn't really see anything. I could see that there was some sort of mass, and then on one side was red, one side was green, but there was no blinking. It just stayed, the light stayed, you know, stationary, and it just stayed in this exact same spot, but it looked like a lot bigger than like a drone. It almost looked like the size of maybe like a car, maybe. And so my question goes out to our listeners, is this like some sort of like drone? Like, is this a common thing that I just don't know about with drones? And again, no blinking lights, about as big as a car, which seems pretty big for a drone. But
I can't remember if my drone blinks or not.
I looked it up last night, and it says that they're, you know, planes or drones, like it's always like a blinking
Yeah, I feel
thing.
like it's like blinking and flashing, yeah.
Yeah, this didn't have any of that, and it stayed in the same place, and it was dead quiet. But I didn't really...
Oh, yeah, and you can hear my drone, dude. And I mean...
Oh, yeah, they're loud.
You know, yeah.
Well, especially if it was as big as a car. Like, it's just weird to me that... I don't know. So if any of you guys know about a drone as big as a car with lights that don't flash...
Has that ever happened to you? Yeah. That's interesting.
So hit us up if you know. I'm not saying I think it's like some sort of ET, like UFO or anything, but it was a little weird, I have to say. Anyway, we hope you enjoyed the show as much as we did making it. We love this story, and we love these weird sort of, you know, just huge amounts of high strangeness stories. If you have your own story, feel free to shoot it to us, your own sort of local urban legend. Maybe you've had your own encounter with like a ghost or a UFO or whatever. We'd love to hear about it. Drop us a line over on our Instagram. If you want to write in your story, feel free to shoot it to our email. That would be radpod@gmail.com. Even better than all those, if you want to tell your story in your own voice and possibly hear it in an upcoming episode, you can do so at our website. That would be radpodcast.com, where you can leave, you know, pretty much like a voice memo and maybe hear it in a future episode. Buy us a coffee. Better yet, if you do want to support the show and you're just not getting enough, that would be rad. You can join our Patreon, The Rabbit Trail, and it's just more of what you love. Tell a friend about the show. Leave a 5-star review. All those things. I know they seem small, but they really are a huge help to the show. You got anything else, Woody?
I think that's about it, man.
All right, pal. Well, we love you. We appreciate you. And as always,
be rad.
That's the way it goes. clouds in a time where I just needed some sunshine. You were already dead, for you became a ghost. You always said